say hello. My name is Kirsten Darrington. I am the Program Director for the Zoo Arts and Parks program, and I'm also joined on this call by Jen Waterhouse, who is our Program Coordinator and answers literally every question that I can. So I'll be doing most of the talking through this webinar, but Jen will be in the wings if there's anything I miss, if I'm showing the wrong screen, or if I muted myself. So please know we are just here for you, and we especially we know there are many new people on this call that while your organization has applied in Tier 1 before, you may not have applied. So we want to be especially generous with our time, and just please know we are here to help you be successful. With that said, I'm going to start recording this webinar. How do I record?
Hey, Kirsten, I actually already have a recording going.
Well, that's great. See, this is what makes Jen so great. Thank you so much, Jen. Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing this slides now. And apologies in advance, but we all kind of get the how things go with Zoom meetings. So we've scheduled 2 hours. We generally don't go that long, but we like to leave time to get through the content and to answer any questions you might have. So to give you an overview of what we are looking at today, I want to start, especially since we have some new people on the call, I would like to start giving a little bit of background about ZAP, things you need to know. Then I want to spend some time going over the eligibility criteria for both the Tier 1 and zoological categories. And then I want to review the scoring criteria and what the review process looks like so you can understand the work the board does and the timeline. And then from there, we'll shift, and I'm going to go into an online demonstration of or a walkthrough of the Tier 1 and zoological application. Overall, it is the same application from last year, but there are a couple changes I will highlight. And then finally, I want to spend some time showing you all the qualifying expenditures worksheet. So we'll do a brief walkthrough of that, and I'll provide some tips and things to keep in mind on that. And then finally, we'll leave time for questions at the end. Please feel free to drop questions into the chat as we are going out throughout the presentation. And then at the end, we can have you unmute yourselves and you can just ask your questions. So that's our format for today. All right. So things you need to know about ZAP. So ZAP was launched in 1997, and this is a program that is reauthorized by Salt Lake County voters every year. And it is funded through 0.1% of sales tax collected in Salt Lake County. And we've been fortunate enough to see growth basically every year since the tax was implemented, with the exception of the recession. Even last year, with the impacts of COVID, we actually saw a slight increase compared to our 2019 revenues. So the mission of the Salt Lake County Zoo Arts and Parks program is to enhance resident and visitor experiences through art, culture, and recreational offerings. And we do that by giving you grants for your work. So thank you for all the work you do. So we give competitive grants to qualifying organizations in 3 categories. Tier 1, which is you guys. We define you as the larger cultural organizations. Then Tier 2, which is our smaller cultural organizations, and that is a much larger category. We fund about 195 people in that category currently. And then finally, the zoological category, which currently funds 3 zoological facilities. So just to give you an idea of the scope of these grants for Tier 1 and these zoological grants, these categories, we currently distribute over 17 million annually to 25 organizations reaching more than 5 million attendees in Salt Lake County. So again, that is the work of our Tier 1 organizations and our zoological organizations, so thank you. And then this is your ZAP team. We are a 2-person team. These pictures, I'm now realizing, are very outdated. This was pre-COVID when we had much shorter hair and a little less gray in our hair. But this is our contact information, and we are here to help in any way we can, like I've said before. The best way to reach us currently is most likely through email. You're welcome to call either of these numbers as well. But we are at the county, we are slowly coming back into the office, but is very part-time. So today I'm in the office, which is great, but that's not always the case. So as we transition back into full-time mode, please feel free to call or email us. And then a couple other things that we want to know that are available to you as a resource as grantees is Jen has gone ahead and created this fabulous page that provides tools for our grantees and applicants on our website. So basically, if you go to zapazoo.org, you can go to the left navigation bar, click on Tools for Grantees and Applicants. That'll take you to this nifty page where you can sign up for our ZAP mailing list, which is our monthly newsletter. We share a lot of ZAP-specific content in that newsletter, in addition to activities our partners are doing and other funding opportunities. So really, it is one of our primary ways of communicating with you. So especially if you are newer to your organization, we strongly encourage you to sign up for this newsletter. Another thing we ask for as part of our review process is that you invite our Tier 1 board members to your events. And the best way to do that is to go to this page and click on this link at the bottom of this web page. This will take you to a brief digital form that you can quickly fill out to enter your event details. And from there, we take that information and we'll email it out to the board, depending on how many events on a bi-weekly or a monthly basis. So that way, it's another way for them to learn more about the work of your organizations from just outside of reading the application. So we thank you for sending those invitations in advance.
And
Also,
Tristan, if I can add real fast, I'm actually just putting together a group of invitations right now to send out in the next day or two. So if your organizations have something that's happening in the next month that you would like sent out, if you could let your whoever in your staff submits that, if you could have them send that in the next probably day and a half, then it'll get included in this most recent one that's going to be sent out here in a minute.
awesome. Jen, thank you so much for that reminder. And generally, a lot of times organizations will offer these events for free to our board members. That's not a requirement, especially for fundraising events. We don't have that expectation. We just would like you to note whether it is free or whether it is a paid for event when you submit the event. All right, and then a quick note on another way to connect with us is through our social media platforms. And this is Jen's world, where she's fabulous at keeping all of these going. But you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. We most heavily use Facebook, and we enjoy a really high level of followers on our ZAP page. And that is where we share out your events. That is where we share out updates on ZAP. But if there are things you would like us to share on our social media platforms, we would ask that you send those to is it the PR ZAP email, Jen?
Yes, correct.
Yes.
przap@slco.org, and I will go ahead and put that into the chat as well.
Awesome, thanks so much. Okay, so now moving on to the eligibility requirements. So I'm lumping Tier 1 and the ZOO logical application together. So I'll make sure to point out where there are differences. But generally, for both categories, you must be an established 501c3 nonprofit. You must have a 3-year average qualifying expenditures of $378,300 or more. So that is how we define the larger organizations. You must have a main office in Salt Lake County. Of course, you can be doing activities outside of Salt Lake County. Many of you serve the entire state, but we just ask that your physical location be within Salt Lake County. And then if you're a zoological organization, we ask per our policies that you serve over 75,000 visitors per year and have accreditation from the AZA or a similar organization. And then finally, we ask, and this is for all of our categories, but that you must belong to a discipline that ZAP funds. And here is a list of those disciplines. Here is a list of these disciplines. So we have 18 here, everything ranging from architecture to music to natural history, and of course, zoological, if you are one of our zoological entities. For Tier 1, we ask that you fall within one of the first 17 groups. And this is where, if you have questions on this, I encourage you to just go look at your last year's application and what you've done in the past. Many of you, if you're newer to your organization, you're going to find basically the majority of the work you need to do will be in your past applications. And if you need help accessing those, reach out to me or Jen, and we can make sure you have that access. And then now looking at the flip side of that, here's a list of what ZAP does not fund. And this is defined very specifically in ZAP policy, so we cannot make exceptions to this. I've gone ahead and bolded and underlined some of the things, the most common questions that come up. So ZAP does not fund events outside of Salt Lake County. We do not fund capital improvements and improvements to real property. That is because we generally will have another source of funding at the county available for that. So if you have questions about that, reach out to me and we can connect you with the right people. We do not fund public art because we consider that a capitalized expenditure. We do not fund lobbying expenses, and we do not fund re-granting. The idea there being that we want the funding to stay with your organization. Now, this isn't to say that you cannot do those activities. We encourage it. We hope you are doing some of this, but we only ask that you do not use ZAP funds for those activities. And then this little red note I have here is that this list can also be found on the third tab of the qualifying expenditures worksheet. And that tab is titled non-qualifying definitions, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Jen, is there anything else we want to say about this list? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. I just feel like there's always something I'm missing.
I think that covers it with the mention of the public art, which I know that we'll see on occasion.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now jumping into the scoring and review process. So these pictures here are pictures of our ZAP Tier I Advisory Board. They're responsible for reviewing both the Tier I applications and the zoological applications. They review and score every single application. It's a 7-member board, and 2 of the appointees on the board must be appointed by the Utah Division of Arts and Museums. That is designed in statute. And it's nice because it keeps a strong relationship between our state arts agency as well as us. And then board members can serve for 3 years with the option to renew for an additional term. It's pretty great because we find that our board members like this work so much and they like making their connections with you so much that it's seldom that I don't have a board member that reviews for another term. So I think you guys just make it too easy to work with you. So the board reviews the applications and then they'll do this over the course of the summer, and then they take their funding recommendations to the county council. And what they do is they can recommend up to 22 Tier I organizations and up to 3 zoological organizations. And this is a board that over the past several years, we have been doing some internal work to look at our practices and our review practices and the way we are scoring applicants. And I'm really proud of this board because they are very committed to making sure that they are conducting an equitable review process and looking at your applications in a holistic way that is leaning more on applauding the work you do and seeing if there's any constructive feedback they can give. But overall, they have been wonderful in terms of embracing a strong focus on equity work and just really applauding the efforts you have done. So keep up the good work again. And then your organization is going to be assigned a lead reviewer from this board. So one of these 7 members will be assigned to 3 or 4 or Tier I organizations or a zoological organization. And the idea there is that they then, when we do the all-day review meeting in the fall, is they present out on your application. They are considered the quote unquote expert on the application. And they also have conducted some type of site visit with your organization prior to the final review meeting. And by site visit, I mean that could be attending a virtual event, attending an in-person event, attending a board meeting, or even having a sit-down meeting with your leadership. So this can take many different forms. And we ask that you work with your assigned board member to determine what is the most comfortable event for you, with the understanding that we are coming out of COVID and transition is looking a little weird for everybody right now. So we've asked that our board be flexible with you, and we'd ask that you just extend that same flexibility to them. And then finally, we encourage you, well, not finally, but we do encourage you to invite the board to as many events per year as makes sense for you. And we can do that through that form that we showed you earlier. And then finally, I wanted to give it just a general note on COVID and the ZAP review process. And essentially, I wanted to stress how much our board appreciates the work and the pivots and the just everything your organizations have had to go through in the past year. And they understand that that means this application and your answers to some of these questions won't look the same as past years. It just can't. There's no way. And the board is very realistic in terms of not wanting to punish anyone or be extra, rough or more scrutinizing in their review process, but rather very much taking the view of they applaud the work you're doing, they want to be supportive, and they just appreciate you all so much and and for the hard work you've done and the impossible work you've taken over the past year. So that is very much the lens they are using for this year's review process. Okay, and getting in a little more into the nuts and bolts of our scoring criteria. So the Tier 1 and zoological applications are graded in 5 areas. There's artistic and cultural vibrancy, public benefit and outreach, the governing board section, management and organizational capacity, and then finally financial health. And you can see in parentheses how each of these sections are weighted. The financial health score is determined based on our ZAP independent CPA's review of your audits, along with the QE worksheet that you are required to turn in with this application. And that score is completely determined by a separate set of criteria that she uses to determine your organization's financial health. And we'll briefly go over that in a little bit. These applications, each of these categories are scored on a scale of 0 to 7, with 7 being the highest score possible. Most applications fall into the 5 to 6 range, but that doesn't mean there aren't exceptions, of course. And then the board is careful to score each section. So if we get to the end of the review process and you want to see how your organization has done, we can make those scores available for you to see. And I'm not going to read through all of this, but this is just a list of how we would define an exceptional application for each category that is scored. So for example, artistic and cultural vibrancy, we want to see the application shows that you engage qualified and diverse arts and cultural professionals, that you inspire and contribute to a vibrant and energetic cultural community, and that you support work that has high merit and connects with the audience. A special note on artistic and cultural vibrancy is that we understand that what constitute as artistic vibrancy may vary in relation to the organization's mission, audience, and community. So depending on the type of programming, we understand that you're going to work with a different group of artists, and we welcome all of that. This was actually a definition we borrowed from the Utah Division of Arts and Museums as we are trying to align our grant-making efforts. So you can also find more on information on our scoring criteria in our guidelines, which you can find on our website, and they should also be attached to the Tier 1 and zoological application in Zoom grants. Okay, going to give you just a minute to take this in. Okay, and we'll go out of the next slide. Okay, here's a little bit about the scoring and review timeline. So this process, because of the in-depth review process and how long it takes us to collect the tax revenues for a given year, it takes about a full year from the time the application opens to the time your organization receives its first payment. So generally we open the application earlier in the year, but with COVID, we've pushed it back a bit. So April is when the application opens. I think we even opened it in May this year, but we are doing the workshop right now. And the deadline is June 25th at 5 p.m. And we cannot make exceptions on that deadline. So if you have questions or concerns about that, please reach out to me. And then July through September, the applications are reviewed by the Tier 1 Advisory Board. Then October through November, the Advisory Board meets to finalize the funding recommendations. And then in December, those are presented to County Council for approval. From there, in January, February, we'll begin putting together contracts for you to sign. You will sign those contracts online in Zoom grants. And then in May, sometimes it's April, but generally it's May, your first payments are distributed. And just so you know, grants are paid out in 11 monthly payments, April through May, and then we skip March to do the reconciliation process every year. This always brings up questions in terms of logistics and timing. So if you have anything specific about this process, please reach out to me. Okay, before we jump into our online demonstration, I want to go over a few application tips. This will be especially helpful for those that have not used Zoom grants before. But the tricky thing about Zoom grants is you won't go directly to Zoom grants to begin your application. You're actually going to go to a link on our website, which I'm going to show you next. And then there'll be a special button that you'll click to start your application. And then from there, when you want to go back to edit your application, you will then go back to Zoom grants to access the application because you already have one started in their system. We also ask that you please whitelist or add as a safe sender the email notices@zoomgrants.com. You will receive program notices and items from me and Jen directly through our email, but a lot of the communication related to award notification and next steps in the process come from notices at zoomgrants.com. So you want to save that email and you want to make sure it doesn't go to your trash, basically. So if you are not the main application contact for your organization last year and were not left logon credentials, and so now you're not sure if your organization has an account or not, please let us know and we can make sure to transfer the account to you or work with you to do that on your end. And also don't forget to add your collaborators. So that would be your executive director, your accountant, any board members who need to see the application. Many times we have people that say, oh, I can't get in, or oh, this was shared with me, but I can't access it. And there's just a box you need to click, and I'll show you what that looks like. And then finally, for more Zoom Grants tips, see the tips and tricks using Zoom Grants in the application resource library that Jen has created. It's a very nifty document. I think first thing you should look at when you get into the application. But that has a lot of helpful tips for troubleshooting, and maybe could potentially save you a phone call if you can check that out. And again, I'll say this probably 10 more times. The applications are due Friday on June 25th. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I'm going to go over to Zoom Grants. And I don't mean Zoom Grants. I'm going to go to zapisu.org. Okay, so this is our website. So again, when you're ready to start your application, you'll go to zapisu.org and you will go to Tier I. You'll click here, or you'll click here if you're with a zoo, but it really ends up taking you to the same link, so it doesn't matter. And then here, this will take you to our Tier I section of the website, and you can see we love tabs. We have our overview tab talking about the Tier I application and who is currently funded. We talk about the process, which I just reviewed. We show you the eligibility criteria. We show you the how to apply, which is where the special button is that you'll click. And then over here are some contractual obligations we recommend you review once you receive funding. So we want to apply, so we're going to click on the Apply tab. We'll scroll down to the second blue button to click Apply here. So this takes us to the application. You know you're in the right place if you can see ZAP 2022 Tier I and Zoological Application, and it says you must be logged in to apply. So I already actually have an email login, so I'm going to go ahead and log in. If you're new, and most of you will already have an organization account, so you don't necessarily need to create a new account. So if you're unsure about this, reach out to me. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. And now it gives me the option to apply. I'll click Apply. And you know you did it right when you get this red message. Thank you, your application has been created. And so this is Zoom Grants. Now you're in. This should not let you create more than one application. So if you don't get this, or if you get a message that says your organization's already started an application, check with your team, or you can reach out to us. So here we have, and this will be at the top of each of the tabs, which is how this application is organized. But we have an overview of the grant opportunity. We list the requirements, which we covered earlier on. And then we list the restrictions, so the things that ZAP cannot fund. And then finally, we list a library of resources for you to reference throughout your application process. Some of these you might not use, some of these you definitely will use, such as the QE worksheet template listed towards the bottom. And then now, once you get past all of that, you'll go to the actual application itself, and you'll fill out the summary, the general eligibility tab, the questions tab, and then the documents tab. So for the summary tab, if you already are using your organization's account, you're going to see a lot of this contact information already populate. So just make sure you're going through and filling out this information. So we want your director's information. Also, if you scroll down on the summary tab, this is where you can add your collaborators. So if you need to add your accountant or a board member, you would fill out this information and then make sure you click the editing access for the application, click invite, and then that will give them a direct email with a link to get into the application. So this step is really often overlooked, but is very tends to be some of the most troubleshooting we see come up most often. And then under here, we are going to ask for some additional information, a secondary contact, and then a financial contact. Many times we realize that's the same person. That's okay. So once you're done filling out the summary information, you're going to go to the next tab. And these things will pop up, but once you've reviewed them, they can be a bit annoying. So if you click hide this, it'll just make those all go away and make the application a little bit easier to navigate. So now I'm in general eligibility. And this is going to be, again, a series of pretty straightforward questions that we need to collect on our end to make sure you're good to go ahead with the application and then that we are in line with our county policies and regulations. So in this section, we will ask for things like, is your organization headquartered in Salt Lake County? What is your organization's primary discipline? And then what 12-month period are you requesting funding for? And then for that, we'd ask that you look at last year's application and then just use the next year for consistency. And then we ask for things like your IRS 501c3 determination letter. So things like that. If you have any questions about getting any of these documents, sometimes people will have questions about what they've done in past years, please let us know. So once you fill that out, you're going to go into the actual meat of the application. This is the application questions. And these application questions have not changed substantially from last year, but we did add a couple of notes talking about the impacts of COVID, which I spoke to earlier when I was talking about our board and their priorities. Again, we realize that your application is going to look a little bit different this year, but that is completely okay. One of the biggest shifts I'd say we did this year is we moved the data questions, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. We've moved the data questions to a smart sheet form. This is a secure form, and if you filled out a survey or filled out anything from us, you'll recognize this format. But Zoom Grants actually, we ran out of room because we're collecting data on where you're doing activities, and we also wanted to get an idea of what type of virtual events you've been holding over the past year. So Zoom Grant or Smart Sheets allowed us to do this in a pretty straightforward way that will help us grab the data and share it with our board members and with our council leaders in a much more effective way. It's also something we'll be able to share back with you as well. So we think this is a benefit, and we'd appreciate any feedback you have this year as you're filling out the application on this specific piece. But we hope it'll just essentially help us tell our story better and help us tell your story better. So going down into the application, we have a space where you can upload a sample video artifact. So this is when you would get the embed code and paste it in here, and then it just populates as a nifty little video at the top of the application. This is optional, but the board members really love seeing it. And then we start off with, of course, what is your board's mission statement? And then we go into the different sections of the application, starting with artistic vibrancy. And these are all questions you can go back and look at how you've answered in previous years, because they are not substantially changed from year to year. Oh, in addition, I will say to the answer to this question, the board will also evaluate the attached documents to evaluate the artistic vibrancy section. And that goes with each of these sections, I would say. The attached documents come into play for each of these different areas. And then under public benefit and outreach, we ask you to tell a story from the past year when it's clear your organization impacted the community. We realize many of these questions, such as this one, would be a good opportunity to highlight how your work, how COVID has impacted your work, and how you have shifted to maybe serve more audience members or maybe reach people you haven't reached before. And we'd love to hear things about like that. And then 4, we ask, describe your organization's effort to reach underserved communities in Salt Lake County with its work. Please clearly define the identified communities, the steps being taken, and what outcomes your organization has seen from this work. So this question is largely the same, with the exception that we are wanting to we are wanting to have you include, if you have any outcomes, if you have any positive results to report or any results whatsoever from this work, the board would love to hear that. They know this work, it looks different for everyone. These efforts can take all shapes and sizes, but the board, one feedback they provided last year was, we would like to really see if there's any results people are seeing from these types of efforts. And then going into question 5, describe one partnership and how it has helped serve your community better. Again, this could be an opportunity to speak to anything you have done with the transitioning and the pivots you've made over the past year. And then we're going into our governing board section. And under each category, or sorry, under each section, we are very careful to list, in addition to these questions, the board is also evaluating these documents, which I think I just hit on earlier. So we ask if we want you to talk about any progress your organization has made towards increasing the diversity on your staff and board of directors. So that's a two-parter question. And then we ask, what is your organization's fundraising policy as it's related to board members? This question is the same as last year. So you could even refer to last year's application to see that answer. And then we move into management, organizational capacity, and stability. We ask you to describe your board's succession planning efforts for key staff. And also we realize this could have changed because of the past year as well. So please feel comfortable speaking to that as much as you'd like. And then what are your organization's key goals and objectives for the next 3 to 5 years? What are your plans for achieving them? Again, this is another area where we realize it's going to look different. It's not going to be the 5-year plan you inputted last year. You could look completely different now, and we respect that, and we hope you take this as an opportunity to speak to that. And then finally, moving into financial health, this is where this section is largely completed with the qualifying expenditures worksheet, which I'll show you next. But we just ask that you put in your total 2020 revenues and qualifying expenses, so we can just verify that with the worksheet. So you'll pull those numbers out of the qualifying expenditures worksheet. And then the other part of financial health we look for is related party transactions. And so we want you to describe any related party transactions which occurred in the last year. So these should be, ideally, would be included on your audit, and that's when you could just pull them from the audit. If the related party transaction is under $5,000, you are not required to disclose it, and the board doesn't look at it. If it is over $5,000, the board will look at it, and they do have a policy in place where they can, depending on the nature of the relationship, they can choose to allow that expenditure, which boosts your award a little bit, or hold back that expenditure, which then would be subtracted from your qualifying expenditure amount. And finally, we have the 2020 evaluation questions. So this section fulfills your organization's requirement to submit a final report showing how last year's ZAP funds were utilized. And that technically should say 2021 evaluation because last year was 2021, but really we just want to know we just want the data from your last year. So we want you to tell us how they were used. We want you to describe any challenges. Again, we realize this could be related to COVID. And then finally, what your organization has accomplished within the past year that you are most proud of. So it's pretty short, but that takes care of the evaluation requirement. So rather than have you submit a separate evaluation report, we tack it on to the end of this application. And then with the Smartsheets link, we have it tucked away at the end of the application. And this is where you will certify that you have submitted the additional data form from via Smartsheets. So you can grab the link here. It is also listed at the very top of the application in the instructions. And then you can, go here, excuse me, paste it into your browser. And this is the nifty, handy dandy data form Jen has created to capture your data from last year. So she outlines here the instructions and what type of information you're going to be including here. And then you go in through here and you fill out the form very quickly. We ask that you include your organization's contact information to help us tie it back to your online application and Zoom grants. And then really, all of these questions in here are questions we've asked from years before. They're just simply in a different form. So we ask about personnel numbers. We ask about event and audience information from your recently completed year. And then you can see we ask specifically, did you hold in-person events or online virtual events or both? So you could select both if that was the case, which many of you did. And then it will give you additional questions to fill out. So again, this is helpful for us in order of determining what last year looked like for everyone and how we can tell that story to our leadership, as well as how can we help promote the work you're doing. And so this is really valuable information, and we appreciate you taking the time to fill this out. And then other things we ask for is the number of public events by area. So we list each city, and then we realize some of you wouldn't have had your event in one city. So we have an online area, an online field you can put numbers in as well. And then if you haven't held events in the city, just simply leave it blank. That's no big deal. And then the final thing we ask here is information on your governing board and who is from each district. In Salt Lake County, we have a link so you can see what those districts are. And then we ask about board training, number of board members, things like that, just to give us a better idea of how your governing board functions. And this information plays into the scoring criteria for the governing board section of the application. So then at the bottom, we have you certify that you must click the box to say you've completed this and you're going to return to the Zoom grants application and mark that you've done that. And then also, I highly recommend you click send me a copy of your responses, because this form will not save, and we will have this information saved, and we will be going back and attaching it to your application, so you will have it for future years. But this way you can get a copy right away. And so then you would add in your email address and click submit. So that is the data form, in a very messy overview. Jen, is there anything you would like to say about the Smart Sheets form that I have missed?
I think that you covered anything or everything with it. The only thing I guess that I would add is that if you're going through and you realize afterward that there's a number that you might need to change, if you'd like to just email me or Kirsten, we can trigger an email that will allow you to go back and update your answers afterward. But it is something that you'll need to email us in order to get that email triggered. And Diane asked, can this be printed? So if you click that button, the checkbox at the bottom that Kirsten had noted for the send me a copy of my responses, you'll want to do that. It'll email it to you, and then you can print off a copy of the email copy that will be sent to you. And that's probably the easiest way to save it if you're looking. Oh, before you answer. I'm sorry, Kirsten, did you say something?
I can show them the worksheet you created, right?
Okay, cool, yes.
So this is a great question. We realized many people are going to be working on this application. So while you may be answering the questions, somebody else might be gathering the data, somebody else is going to be working on the QE worksheet. So one thing we wanted to do to help with this process is we've created, going all the way back to the top, in the resource library. So if you want to show them, because I hid them and now I can't find them, you go back up here, click on these buttons. Is in the resource library, Jen has included an application data worksheet. And if you click on that, this gives you the Word version of the worksheet. So you could even print this out beforehand and use this to fill in the data. And then when you're ready to take it to Smart Sheets, you can then use this information to fill out that form. We have implemented this for our Tier 2 applicants, and we have found that a lot of applicants have gone in first to complete the numbers and then go back and finish their application, which is completely fine. All we care is that both pieces are in by the deadline. But so far, it seems to be working for those guys. So we hope that's the same for this group as well. But yeah, this is a document you can save, and then you can have for your files and your reference. Um, Again, this is the first time we've tried this year, so we welcome any feedback on this. And yeah, I think that's it. Okay. So let me go back. And Jen, can you see, were you guys even, were they able to see the Word document? I just realized I don't know if I switched that.
Yes, it was visible.
Okay. And going back to the application, so that was the bulk of the application. We went through the application questions and the smart sheet. The final thing you'll do is you're going to go into the Documents tab, and you'll have a lot of required documents to upload. So we want you to upload the expenditures worksheet. You can grab that worksheet from here, or you can grab it from the resource library. And then we want your audits for the last 3 consecutive years, so 2020, 2019, 2018. We also require that you submit a peer review letter from your auditor. So this is not a letter that your auditor writes. This is a letter from an outside, a separate CPA firm that has reviewed your organization's auditor and said, no, these are legit, they're following GAAP, they're good to go. This is a letter that they have to renew every 3 years. So if you don't have this, you reach out to your auditor. This is something they have to have on file and can get to you very quickly. We also have you require that you attach an organization chart and then a list of board members. We ask that you don't include their personal contact information, but just the district they live in. That's very helpful. We want your current season brochure. And as a requirement, we ask that you give us verification of listing an event on Now Playing Utah. So you can put a link into as an answer here, and that would satisfy that requirement. And then also we require some verification that you have used the ZAP logo. So if there's a program brochure or a picture of a banner or whatever, please include that here. And then these are optional but strongly encouraged. So visual documentation, if it's photos or videos, things like that, include them here. And then another optional item would be your annual report, your POPs report, anything that helps us give a better, whole 360-degree picture of your organization. And then this is required. This is an executive summary of your organization. This is basically a one-pager that gives us the basic overview of major programs and activities of your organization. This helps our board members, especially the newer ones, just quickly absorb the information so then they can focus more on the in-depth questions asked for in the narrative section. So this is a very, very helpful. And then finally, this is optional as well, a list of partners. If that is something you feel would enhance a part of this application, we welcome that as well. So once you have uploaded everything, we ask that you go back through each of these tabs to make sure the information is all complete and filled out. And then when you're ready, you can click Submit Now. And this, by clicking this, if I was missing any information, which I am, it'll prompt you and say, here are all the questions that we still need answers. So it's a great reminder if you have left anything out, or maybe if something didn't save. So once you add any additional missing information, you'll click Submit Now, and then you will be asked to enter your initials to certify that the information provided in the grant is true and correct to the best of your knowledge. And then you'll submit the application. Once your application has been submitted, you can go back in and edit it up until the deadline. So if there's an attachment you don't have, or if there's a piece of information you're missing or data you're missing, you can submit early, which we strongly encourage, and then go back and edit. And again, deadline is June 25th at 5 p.m. Okay, so that is the application in a nutshell. Now I would like to show you, I'd like to hop over to the QE worksheet. But Jen, I'm wondering if before we do that, would this be a good time to check in on any questions, or can we wait till the end based on
I
what you're
think
saying?
that we are actually up to date on questions at the moment, but in the event that anyone does have any, I will continue to monitor the chat and jump right in if any are put up.
Fabulous. Okay. Okay. So moving into our qualifying expenses worksheet. This is the section where if you are not filling this out, this is a part of the video what you can mark and then share with your accountant or your CPA and say, okay, this is the part you need to worry about. And especially if this is your first time doing this application, this can be a little bit daunting. But the nice thing is, the majority of you on the call have past worksheets that you're just simply updating from year to year, because this does not change. This does not change from year to year that often. So a quick overview, this is a big worksheet. It's a Excel workbook. It has 12 tabs. Most of those are definitions, but several of them are where we want you to enter your numbers. So the first tab is just general information and instructions about the QE worksheet. Second tab gives you specific definitions and instructions for filling out each tab. 3 is the one I talked about earlier. That is the non-qualifying definitions tab, and that goes into a lot more detail, so please review that. And then the fourth tab is going to be the new data. So this is going to be the information from your 2020 financial certified audit. And this is where you want to make sure you're paying attention to the instructions and updating that appropriately. And then your 2019 or 2018 tabs, so the fifth and sixth tabs, those are going to be blank, but you can easily populate them with data from your last year's qualifying expenditure worksheet. Also, many times when our CPA is reviewing these documents, she will make minor corrections if a expenditure was placed in the wrong column or if something wasn't backed out. She'll make that, and then I will send that corrected version to you. So many of you should already have these, but if you have questions about, oh, was my qualifying expenditure worksheet updated or corrected from last year, I can double check and let you know. So please follow up with me separately. So then the 7 and 8 tabs, tab 7 is summary page definitions, and the summary page is where we take all 3 tabs, so 2020, 2019, and 2018, and we sum it up into this nice little formula that spits out your qualifying expenditure number, which is an average of those past 3 years of expenditures. And that is the number we will use to calculate your 2022 ZAP award. So that's also a description of the summary worksheet. And then tab 9 is actual use. This is just a quick list that shows you what was the item and then how much that funding went towards it. So that is the nitty gritty, how the funds were spent. So that should tie to your evaluation questions in the application. And then tab 10 is calculations. We do have some calculations for things like rent, salaries, commissions. That is where you would calculate that those amounts just to show that you're not exceeding the cap. We've put those in place because it helps keep the playing field a bit level. And if you have questions as you get into that, please let me know. And then 11 and 12 are optional, but that is where you can do reconciliations. If for some reason your QE worksheet does not agree to your audit, the reconciliations tab is where you would explain that. And then finally, 12 explanations is optional, but we strongly encourage it, especially if you've seen a drastic change in your finances from 2019 to 2020, or your 2019 fiscal year to your 2020 fiscal year, which we realize many of you might have. So this is a great area to say, hey, here's what happened. Here's why. So I'm going to pull up the QE worksheet really quickly, so that way you can just see the tabs really quickly that I've just described. So this is if you go down here, you can navigate all the tabs. So we have, if you can see, it's at the very bottom. My apologies if this is cut off, but this is where you can see the labels. So early instructional tabs are color coded. So this is the first tab gives you the general instructions. And then we give you definitions like I was saying in my list. And then non-qualifying definitions. So things like we talked about: capital construction, all depreciation, repairs and maintenance, real property. And then these 3 tabs is where you're going to enter the numbers. So 2020 will be new information from your most recent audit. 2019 will be from your 2019 audit. And 2018 will be from your 2018 audit. Then we have summary page definitions, so you know how to fill that out. And then, or so you know what they're looking at for each section, I apologize. Because the summary sheet will automatically pull through all the numbers from the other tabs. And then it will spit out your 3-year average qualifying expenditure amount, which is what we use to calculate your award. Then we go into the actual use sheet. So we have these categories already listed. You could just plug in the numbers from your last year's award. This is the CAP calculations worksheet. And if you are a theater company, we ask that, while many of you, I don't know if anyone exceeds this cap, but we greatly appreciate it if you can fill out this royalty cap calculation, just so our CPA can verify that no revenues exceeded the cap we have calculated here. And then reconciliations, you're only using this if your QE worksheet doesn't tie to your audits. So many people won't need this. And then finally, explanations. So this is where you can see we have some fields listed, but we love hearing about anything that you can share with us to help give us an idea if there was a drastic change, what happened there, things like that. So that is the QE worksheet in a nutshell. I'm going to go back now to share our slides and get us through the rest of our presentation. A couple things to know about the QE worksheet. Actually, this number, the 378,000, I believe it's 378,300, so that's wrong, but the number listed in the QE worksheet is correct. And the salary cap for individual salaries is still listed at 97,280. That is the same as previous years. And then the 2019, I said this, but the 2019 and 2020 tabs should match any changes made by the ZAP program. So if our CPA made a correction. And then we ask that you please back out all lobbying and fundraising expenses. So we know to be specific, we know many Tier 1 organizations pay into a separate a lobbying group known as, I want to say, the Tier 1 Advisory Board. And you will pay dues to that. And that is a separate thing where your purpose is to monitor ZAP revenues and be an advocate for the specific ZAP tax. But we ask that you back those out as well. And then one thing I wanted to stress that you might have briefly seen on the QE worksheet is that for the 2022 application, the Tier 1 Advisory Board has determined that any application with an audit showing going concern language related to COVID-19 will not fail the ZAP financial health test based on this metric alone. So if you look at our guidelines, we have a section at the end that shows the financial health scoring criteria, and it breaks down exactly every mini test that is run to arrive at the score for your financial health. And one of the things that we've always had is if your audit lists a going concern, that is an automatic fail. Now, it doesn't mean if you fail that, you fail a financial health test. That doesn't necessarily mean you will not be funded in ZAP. It just means it would bring down your overall score. So knowing that we are in such a weird time, knowing we are in such a weird time right now, we understand most audits are going to have some type of COVID-related disclosure, and we don't want that to work against you. And then finally, we ask that you please explain any miscellaneous programs, administration, other expenditures, include administrative and other salary details. So we ask, these are just things that we'll ask for in the explanations tab and on each of the 2018, 2019, 2020 tabs. So just look out for that. And then finally, talking about related party transactions. So again, these are included in the audit. Any amount exceeding 5,000 may be disallowed. Like I mentioned, the advisory board has a policy where they have the discretion to allow the related party transaction or disallow. And we cover in the instructions tabs on the QE worksheet how, if you have a related party transaction, how you would go about providing additional information to so that the board may allow it. Especially in recent years, if an organization can show that the related party transaction, say, so if you have a board member providing services for your organization, but if there was a process for bringing this person on, if it was voted on at a board meeting, if there was a transparency in the process, that the board wants to allow those. So please include that information if you have it, because they want to help you out with your expenditures as much as possible. And again, yeah, we talk more about that in detail in the worksheet. Oh, okay, we made it. I saw a couple of questions pop up that we'll make sure to answer. But just really quickly, as kind of a takeaway, here's our contact information, a reminder of the application deadline, and then also if you attended, or even if you weren't able to attend the ZAP Catalyst for Change conference we held last week, we will be sharing out additional resources, including a video showcasing highlights from the conference in the coming weeks. So we ask you to watch out for that. Jen, with that, I think I'll take some questions. Do we have any?
Perfect, we do. So Deanne was asking about backing out fundraising expenses. She was wondering what that means specifically. She understands the lobbying expense.
Oh, yes. So that is, we want you to back out fundraising expenses that are related to an endowment or capital construction. So we understand you're going to have fundraising expenses, but that will be in the instructions tab or in the non-qualifying definitions tab in the QE worksheet. But we specifically want you to back out fundraising expenses related to those two things. So if it's a general fundraising, that's okay. But if they're related to an endowment or a new building, back those out.
Right. And then we also had a question about previous year's QE worksheets and whether or not it's possible to get those pre-populated with their previous year's data.
This is my dream. We are not there yet, but I hate to have you guys go back and fill in duplicative information. So we don't have a way of doing that yet. But we are, please note, it is on our wish list. So right now we're asking, you're just basically manually going back and filling in, you're plugging in numbers from one Excel worksheet into the other. So apologies for that, but we are working on that.
Great. That's what we have for questions at the moment. I'm going to continue to monitor the chat, but I believe that we addressed everything that was asked before. Oh, there was also a question whether we had a PDF or a document of all of the questions that people can work on outside of the portal. We can certainly pull together a Word document of the questions if that's helpful, but if you'd like to have it right now, if you go into the application after you've created it and then you click the print preview button, it'll bring up a PDF that you can download that will have all of the application questions in it, and you can use that to refer to outside of Zoom grants.
With Zoom grants, one other thing that I didn't hit on that Jen you've been so good at doing it in the other webinars, is with the high volume of people now using Zoom grants at Salt Lake County, and for instance, when we are distributing CARES funding, we found that the system can get a bit bogged down. If you notice that, we highly encourage you to back up your answers in a separate Word doc or somewhere else in case, for whatever reason, they don't save. This is rare, but we have found with our Tier 2 groups, or if somebody's working on the application close to the deadline, there always seems to be some glitch where the application should auto-save as you're clicking through the fields, but having a backup is strongly encouraged. And we know many of you have that practice in place already, but just stating for the record. All right, any other questions?
I think that covers what we have in the chat at the moment. Awesome.
Well, thank you guys so much for giving us your time today. And if you please reach out with any individual questions. I know I said that probably 100 times, but but we really want to be helpful. So we'll hang out for a few more minutes. But if you have everything you need, please hop off, and happy ZAP application writing.
Thanks, everybody.